business process re-engineering. We're going to start off by looking at an example. In the 1980s, Ford Motor Company's accounts payable employed more than 500 people, which it understood was way too many people. They started off by analyzing their existing systems. Now, they understood that their purchasing system worked in a rather complicated way. Now, it worked in a way wherein the purchasing department sent a copy of a purchase order to accounts and to the vendor. Now, the goods were then received by materials control, who sent a copy of the receiving documents also to accounts, and the vendor would also send their invoice to accounts. Now, this meant that most accounts payable clerks spent most of their time matching values on various documents like invoices, purchasing documents, etc., and chasing various people and then issuing payments. Now, to correct this complicated situation, Ford firstly asked its vendors to not send any purchasing invoices to accounts. They started using an online order system wherein purchasing actually creates the purchase orders online, and materials control uses this exact entry to actually check the goods received, and if there is a match, the payment is automatically generated, the check is generated, and accounts only has to send the check to the relevant vendors. Now, by implementing this process, Ford managed to achieve a 75% reduction in their headcount, which is exactly what they wanted. And this is an example of what is called business process re-engineering, or BPR. Now, BPR is essentially a process employed to greatly improve organizational performance by radically redesigning business processes. It's important to understand the significance of the word radically. The aim here is to dramatically improve organizational performance by improving an organization's efficiency and effectiveness of their processes. Now, it's important to note that BPR doesn't just involve improving or redesigning business processes, like certain business processes. It also involves redesigning associated systems and organizational structures. Structurally, BPR follows a simple three-step process of analysis, design, and implementation, with each step being as important as the other two. We are, however, going to break the steps down further by looking at some research conducted on the subject. Now, Michael Hammer and James Champy were key contributors in the field of BPR. Now, let's look at some of the steps that they proposed for carrying out BPR. The first step is to actually identify the process for review. The next step is to review processes selected to analyze the current situation. Now, they need to understand, the managers need to understand how the process is performing currently, and they can do so by looking at financial data, stakeholder data, software tools available, efficiency data, etc. Now, the next step is to design the process improvements. Here, it's important to designate key performance indicators, or KPIs, for every improvement mapped, and to ensure improvements can actually be measured. Now, the next step is to actually implement the process improvements. Here, it's important to keep all relevant stakeholders in the loop. Okay? And what's also important is to review the whole process, the whole redesign, periodically, to ensure that the results that we set out to achieve were actually achieved. Okay? Now, Hammer and Champy also produced 7 principles of BPR to ensure successful implementation. Now, let's look at these principles. The first is organize around outcomes and not tasks. Now, this means focusing on the actual outcome of any function or activity. And achieving outcomes optimally could actually mean defining the outcomes clearly and combining several jobs together. Okay, we are talking about re-engineering at the end of the day. The focus needs to shift from what we are doing now to what we need to do. This could also mean, in their opinion, getting one person to perform all the steps of a process by redesigning his or her job around the outcomes of the process and not the actual tasks. Okay, so we're actually organizing the entire process around outcomes and not the actual tasks which are being performed. Now, the next principle is have those who use the output of the process perform the process. Okay, now this reduces risk and the involvement of more people than necessary. Now, for instance, managers should be able to complete certain purchases themselves rather than going to procurement for everything, because they are the ones who are going to actually use the output of the process. So they should be performing the processes themselves. Now, the next principle is integrate information processing into the real work that produces the information. Okay. Now, this means that people who actually collect information need to be assigned responsibility to also analyze it, instead of relying on other people to do so. Now, the next principle is treat geographically dispersed resources as though they were centralized. Now, any resources that are geographically dispersed need to work as a centralized resource to improve on efficiency. Now, for instance, an organization with various branches located across the nation needs to have a centralized procurement division. Now, this ensures that goods can be procured in bulk in most of the cases, and the prices can actually be better. So if you imagine an organization like maybe a cafe chain which has several cafes, several branches located across the country. Now, if all of them wants to buy coffee machines or a milkshake machine, if they buy individually, they're going to get the usual trade prices. But if they buy centrally, they can buy several units together and get a better price. Now, the next principle is link parallel activities instead of integrating their results. Now, this directs towards ensuring optimal project management and product development. Okay. Now, various product development projects actually fail because of several components being designed in parallel and the components not working together as intended. So it's extremely important to always keep an eye on all of the parallel activities taking place and ensuring that there is a link between them. So this ensures that the product at the end works as expected. And the next principle is put the decision point where the work is performed and build control into the process. Now, if decision making is a part of actual work functions, it will speed things up for you. A lot of organizations have people analyzing or auditing data. Now, project managers and line managers need to be responsible for monitoring results and making decisions without needing other people to look at results and interpret the results for them. And they also need to be able to take certain decisions without approaching regional management. Now, the next principle is capture information once and at the source. Now, as far as possible, information should be collected and fed in only once, and by the person responsible for actually generating it. So this means it's best to not have people responsible purely for feeding information or data entry. So information captured by a person should be fed by that person into the database to reduce the probability of errors, because human error is always an important element to consider. Now, BPR is not without its shortcoming. First and foremost, it's an all or nothing approach. The main problem with BPR is the very nature of it. It's a drastic all or nothing approach with uncertain results, because you're not guaranteed any results at the end of all of that re-engineering. Now, such approaches are not entirely practical in the modern business scenario, as you'd understand. Negative results. Now, large-scale layoffs, radical changes to corporate culture, opposition to change, declining staff morale, disruptions and disorders are just some of the potential negative effects of something as drastic as a BPR implementation. So, more companies therefore choose to adopt more gradual and innovative approaches, wherein changes are incorporated gradually, slowly, and more logically with a lot of people on board, rather than implementing something as radical or drastic as BPR. Okay, so that was an introduction of business process re-engineering. I hope you found the tutorial useful.